In May 2012, the Associated Press reported on a CIA operation in Yemen that stopped an al-Qaeda plot to detonate a bomb on an airplane bound for the U.S. A year later, in May 2013, the Justice Department notified the AP that it had secretly obtained phone records for work, home, and cell phone numbers of some individual AP reporters, as well as for bureaus in New York, Washington, and Hartford, Connecticut, and the House of Representatives Press Gallery. Some 20 phone lines assigned to the AP and its journalists in April and May 2012 were tracked. The Justice Department did not explain why the phone records were seized. Our speaker today, Gary Pruitt, the president and CEO of the AP, responded immediately. He wrote to Attorney General Eric Holder, calling the seizure a, quote, massive and unprecedented intrusion, unquote, into the news-gathering activities of the AP. Mr. Pruitt said the action interfered with AP's constitutional rights to gather and report the news. Mr. Pruitt speaks not only as the head of one of the world's largest news-gathering organizations, but also as a First Amendment lawyer.
Before coming here today to speak, I thought it would be a good idea to get a sense of how the seizure of AP's phone records by the U.S. Department of Justice was affecting our reporting. And what I learned from our journalists should alarm everyone in this room, and I think should alarm everyone in the country. The actions of the DOJ against AP are already having an impact beyond the specifics of this particular case. Some of our longtime trusted sources have become nervous and anxious about talking to us, even on stories that aren't about national security. And in some cases, government employees that we once checked in with regularly will no longer speak to us by phone, and some are reluctant to meet in person. Now, the government may love this. I suspect they do. But beware the government that loves secrecy too much. Today, I want to provide you on the latest news from the front on the seizure of AP's phone records by the Department of Justice. So on May 7th of last year, 2012, AP published a story on a foiled plot by an al-Qaeda affiliate in Yemen. Al-Qaeda was planning to use a new and more sophisticated bomb to destroy an airliner headed for the United States. Our story revealed that the CIA had thwarted this attack, and which was intended to coincide with the first anniversary of the killing of Osama bin Laden. Now, that's a real scoop. And it was broken, incidentally, by two longtime AP national security reporters who shared last year's Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting. It was not, however, a story that was a surprise to the U.S. government. As the story itself pointed out, AP had held the story for 5 days at the government's request because that sensitive operation was still ongoing. And then only after the administration had reassured us that the national security risk had been allayed, had passed, did we release the story. So the story was important on its own merits. That's a big story. Americans have a right to know that such an attack was being plotted and that their government was able to prevent it. But the story also brought into question a statement made by White House Press Secretary Jay Carney. Just 2 weeks earlier, Carney had said, "We have no credible information that terrorist organizations, including al-Qaeda, are plotting attacks in the U.S. to coincide with the anniversary of bin Laden's death." Yet, here was AP finding that, in fact, the CIA has been right in the middle of foiling exactly such a plot. It turns out that the person who was to carry the bomb was a double agent, working with the CIA, the Saudis, and the British. Now, some have argued that AP got the context wrong, that this was never an al-Qaeda plot, but a CIA scheme from the outset. But I can tell you that interpretation strains credulity. This was an al-Qaeda operation. Al-Qaeda constructed the bomb, and its agents were working to activate the plan. So the story received wide attention, as you would expect. And soon after, the Department of Justice announced that it was launching a leak investigation. and it appointed a U.S. attorney to take it on. Now, fast forward 1 year. Last month, on Friday, May 10th, we received a letter from the Department of Justice informing us that it had secretly seized the records for 21 AP phone lines, which we now know was over a 40-day period around the same time that our story was released. So this was an unprecedented intrusion into AP's news-gathering records. We had never seen anything like this before. And it was an intrusion by government officials that was so broad, so overreaching, so secretive, that it violated the protective zone that the First Amendment provides journalists in the United States. But the Justice Department has rules about how subpoenas that target the press work. And these rules, they date back to the Watergate era. And they require that any demands of the press be as narrowly drawn as possible. But the DOJ, but this is different. What the DOJ was, they were collecting AP records. They're not collecting up these records just to load them into some database. This was a specific criminal investigation. They have a dedicated team of prosecutors poring over these records to locate a source of AP reporting. And in doing so, they're accessing a broad swath of other news-gathering information that's protected by the First Amendment against precisely this type of intrusion. Now, the second way the Department of Justice violated its own rules was in executing the subpoena without notice to AP, which meant we could not seek judicial review. The DOJ claims the exception applied here, that if they had notified us, it would have substantially impaired their investigation. The DOJ claims that by notifying AP, if they had notified us, it would have tipped off the leaker. But the leaker certainly already knew of this investigation. It was publicly announced. The FBI Director, Robert Mueller, publicly announced this investigation 9 days after our story ran. And fifth, we want the department to institutionalize formally what President Obama and Attorney General Holder have said publicly, that the Justice Department will not prosecute any reporter for doing his or her job. The department should not criminalize or threaten to criminalize journalists for doing their jobs, such as calling them co-conspirators under the Espionage Act, as they did Fox reporter James Rosen. This needs to be part of an established directive, not limited to the current administration. No one in this country should ever be prosecuted for committing journalism. If reporters' phone records are now open territory for the government to secretly monitor, then news sources will be intimidated from talking to reporters. Now, the AP is not going to be intimidated, but our sources will be. And non-official news sources are critical to a free press and critical to holding a government accountable. Otherwise, you're just going to hear from the official sources. And then the public will only know what the government wants them to know. And that's hardly what the framers had in mind when they wrote the First Amendment. Now, this month's headlines, if they show us anything, show us just how much power and information the government has, and why a robust free press is more important than ever. The DOJ's actions could not have been more tailor-made to comfort authoritarian regimes that want to suppress their own news media. The United States does it too, they can say. We believe that the rules were violated in this case, and the department believes they weren't. And they went ahead in secret and got their way, right? They swept up all the records and told us about them up to 90 days later. And if they can do that, then their perspective will always prevail. And that's what the rules contemplate. And only under exceptional cases can they go in secret. But under their reasoning, as I said, every case is that exceptional case. We don't want to tip off the leaker. Even in a public investigation, give me a break. AP alone got this scoop. It was a very significant news story, and obviously a sensitive news story. And AP went to the administration and talked to them about it. and the administration asked us to hold the story out of national security concerns. And we did. The White House asked us to hold the story one more day, but not for national security reasons. They were going to announce the thwarted plot the next day. And we didn't feel that we should hold the story for that reason. And so we released the story. But we did not hear from either that in any way the national security was compromised, nor did we get pushback from them for running the story. We didn't hear anything until a year later when we found out that our records got swept up as part of the leak investigation.
If this was really about when the story was published, not whether, why do you think that now, as Attorney General Holder has said, that they consider this now to be one of the most dangerous leaks ever?
That's a really good question. No, but we are looking at our contracts very carefully with our phone service providers. We're making sure that we can try to get as much notice as possible of subpoenas, that we have as much knowledge of how we can protect our records, having to deal with sources a little differently who are anxious about having their phone numbers associated with the Associated Press. And I will tell you that could be going on at your news organization right now today, and you don't know it, but you'll find out 90 days later, potentially. You'll get a nice surprise in the mail, like we did. But we also know that the Department of Justice could follow reporters and what they're doing on foot as well. So, journalism goes on, but we will do our best to make sure we can protect our sources and still get the stories. Yes, so the phone service providers, when they get subpoenas like this from the government, they comply, and they're required to comply. And the government also notifies them not to notify us. So the answer to this is not in getting a better contract with Verizon. It can help, but that's not the answer. The answer is getting better guidelines at the Department of Justice.
You mentioned the similar situation with Mr. Rosen at Fox News. How do you compare what's happened there with what's happened at AP?
I think in some ways, I think they're similar. I think in some ways ours is worse, and in some ways that situation is worse. I think ours was broader, it was a broader sweep up of material, as far as I know. Ours was a very broad, overreaching, sweeping gathering of news gathering information in secret. I think what the Justice Department did in the Rosen case was more offensive in the sense that they put in a subpoena for a search warrant that he was a co-conspirator under the Espionage Act. In other words, that he may have been violating the Espionage Act and be a criminal for his actions, which were acting as a journalist. And as I said, we don't think people should be prosecuted for committing journalism. And so I think, and given the degree of what they went after and how they tracked him and where the meetings he had, et cetera, I think there was more searching, a deeper investigation into his particular activities. So in that sense, it was more troubling. So I think there were two different cases, both raise substantial issues. I think that because of the AP issue and the Fox News issue, there has been greater awareness and more focus on the Obama administration's aggressive stance towards leakers. And I think that that is more well-known, and I think that it has gotten more scrutiny since then. So I think it may not have gotten much attention before. I think it will get more attention now as a result of these cases.